Hey you guys, Quentin with Caterpillar Wrenching, and today I am starting one of 100 tips for beginner technicians and beginner heavy equipment mechanics. So I think this might be one of the most important things. Here we're going to have bolts and how to decipher if it's a metric or a standard bolt. So right off the bat, you can see I got two cap bolts. One actually has a decimal on it, 11.9. And this one has the lines on it with an LE. So the one with the decimal, always with that grading and a metric number, or with the decimal I should say, that's gonna be your metric bolt. So this right here is a metric bolt, especially if you're working for CAT or if you're working on CAT. Almost 9 times out of 10, it's always gonna have a point on there. So unless you're using some other outfit to get your bolts, even that, a lot of the times it'll have the grading of the bolt right there, and it'll have a decimal in it. So this one's 11.9. Sometimes they're different, but this right here is a metric bolt. Coarse thread on this metric bolt. Like I said, once again, this guy right here is going to be your standard bolt. You can see the LE with the lines. Very, very important that you guys always check this when they're coming out, when they're going in. Always put them in by hand. Make sure you get a few threads on them. The rule of thumb, pretty much for any bolt, is if you take that bolt and it needs to at least get a full nut size on there, or some people will say that diameter of the bolt needs to at least be that much of a nut on that diameter of the bolt to secure it. So just always keep that in mind when you're putting something in there, in any hole. There goes our metric bolt. Right here, I got a gauge. It actually works great. If you don't have one, I highly recommend one. I got this one from Peterson Cat back when I used to work for Peterson Cat. So quick, down and dirty, easy way to check them also is, here's your standard bolt. You try to put your standard bolt in these metric holes, they're gonna not really fit. You see that? And this is the diameter of the shank that we're going off. So obviously that's a 12, that's a 10, doesn't fit in the 10, too big in the 12. So we know that this is not actually a metric bolt just by doing that. Flip that bad boy around. Boom. There we go. Or, nope, that one doesn't fit. This one fits the best. This is a 7/16 diameter. All right, this one, like I said, 7/16. Same thing for a metric. If you're trying to figure out exactly what bolt and part number in your parts identification, this is a metric bolt. You could tell by the decimal. It's a little hard to see, but it's 11.9. You can see it there. All right, so we're gonna check exactly the diameter of the bolt. 10 doesn't fit in 10. Boom, fits in 12, okay? So this is an M12 bolt, a metric bolt, because we know it's not gonna fit in standard. I'll show you. 7/16. It's like you're forcing it. It could almost thread into that, right? You could force it down and force it into that. So that's not the right diameter. So we know it's not a standard bolt. We know it's a metric M12 bolt, okay? And the length of this metric M12 bolt, the same thing. You're gonna push it right up against there. Damn mosquitoes over here. And this is 40 millimeters length, okay? So here, if you're looking up a bolt, this one is actually an M12 bolt right here by a 1.75 thread pitch by 25 millimeters long. So you would measure out your bolt if you need to verify and double check that that's the right bolt part number, and then you would order your bolt part number. That would be right there. So very important tip if you're just getting started in this industry. If you're just learning about this stuff, is metric and a standard bolt, okay? Once again, This is your metric bolt, and this is going to be your standard bolt. All right, and both of these are coarse right here. On that is going to be your thread pitch right here. So when you're looking at the M8, the M12 1.75, the 1.75 is your thread pitch, and I'll get into that later to show you guys how to check thread pitches and all that good stuff. So once again, metric and standard bolt, part 1 of 100 tips for beginner heavy equipment mechanics. All right, heavy equipment technicians. Stay tuned. Go follow Caterpillar Wrenching if you haven't already. Thank you very much. All right, real quick, I just want to show you guys how to identify these on the machine. You're coming up to your machine. You're looking at your bolt. This one actually says 10.9. So if you guys have been listening so far, 10.9, what's that going to be? That's going to be our metric bolt. So right off the bat, 16, 18 millimeter heads for our sockets, 16, 18 millimeter sockets. For a lot of this, just, you know, inner type of panels and stuff like that, cabs, a lot of different things for Caterpillar actually use a 16 and 18 head. So just a heads up, that's how you can walk up to your machine and identify it. Most newer Caterpillar machines are going to be metric bolts, but they have made a lot of machines metric and standard. There's some pretty nice engineers out there that take care of us. So you could only imagine. And I'll show you guys how to actually take one of these bolts out and thread it in with your hands just to verify that you have the right thread pitch and you have the right bolt. So once again, if you put this standard bolt, you try to put it in that hole for this metric one, you will cross thread it, and you'll know right away when you put it in there. This one's actually a fine thread I just grabbed. So obviously you can see the difference of the threads, right? Big difference on the threads. So look at your holes. You can normally tell the difference between a fine thread and a coarse thread right off the bat. All right, so there goes a metric bolt on this cab right here that we have taken off. It's for Cal Fire, so that's how you can identify them when they're on the machine. And one more thing is I'll show you is how to thread them in by hand and to verify that you have the right bolt. Come over here. What bolt is that? It's a metric bolt. It's going to either be a 16 or an 18. Looking at it right off the bat, it's a little bit bigger, so I'm pretty sure that's going to be an 18 mil socket. Very, very common. 18 mil sockets and 16 mil sockets. I can't say it enough. All right, so this one was a 18 mil. I actually paint my 18 mils, all my sockets blue, and all my 16 mils red, so it makes it nice and easy to go to my tote tray and grab them. So what I'm gonna do, take that one out. You can see how much of that bolt that they had going in there. So always keep in mind, you're going through that tinware right there, right? You're going through that tinware right there, and you're going into there. And what it's threading in there is about a nut, right? It's about a nut length. So that's kind of how Cat engineers do it. That's kind of how it's an industry standard. So I'll show you guys how to thread this back in and make sure that you have the right bolt. All right, guys, so I just took this bolt out of this hole right here. As you can see, it's got the 10.9. That's the grade of the strength of the bolt. All right, but that also tells us one other thing. This is a metric bolt. So just want to show you what happens if I try to not put a metric bolt in there. Say I'm not very familiar. So obviously a 7/16 diameter shank bolt and a M12 bolt are very similar. So I'm going to try to put this 7/16 inside this hole. As you can see, that one is a standard bolt. How can you tell? It has the lines and LE. A lot of Cat bolts will say LE, not guaranteed, but a lot of them will. Look, this thing's threading in. Very, very loosely though. See that? That's not correct. You do not have the right bolt inside this hole currently. So pull that bolt out. It did let you thread it in. And a bolt like this, it'll let you thread it in. And as soon as you put an impact on it, it'll strip your threads out. All right, so it's a heads up on that one. And then here's this guy. That guy's a metric bolt, right? It's not the exact bolt that I just showed you, but it's a metric bolt. So it's gonna go into that hole and it's gonna thread in perfectly because it's the same thread pitch and it's the same diameter and it's a metric bolt, okay? But this bolt's too long. But the way you could tell it's the perfect bolt because I get it in there quite a few threads and it doesn't move around. It's nice and tight. So there's that. I'll get that later, don't worry. All right, so now we have a standard bolt fine thread. Let's try to put that in that hole. This obviously just doesn't even want to start, okay? So that one's hard to fuck up, but believe it or not, it can happen. So watch yourself. It's a standard, even if it's metric. Look at that thread pitch. Try to look at those threads inside there. That does not look like fine threads, right? So you know right off the bat, if you're a mechanic or a technician, that there's too many threads here to go into that hole. All right, it's not a fine hole. It's a coarse hole. You can kind of see it right off the bat. Maybe be a little hard for you guys. So last but not least, we have, oh, there goes that standard one again. All right, well, thank you guys very much. Once again, that's how you can verify that you have the right bolt. If you had a standard one that's just a little bit bigger, it's gonna go in there probably maybe three or four turns, probably not even that, and then it'll kind of stop and seize up, and that's how you know that it's not the right bolt. All right, this one right here kind of lets you do it. Maybe I'll go grab a bolt and show you guys. All right, I just realized I messed up earlier. This is actually a 1/2 inch standard bolt is very similar to an M12. So these are the two that you can get mixed up. Once again, you could see the LE right there. So I went to grab this so I could show you the closer that they are in diameter, that you can get them a little bit more mixed up. So, all right, let me see. All right, see how this one, it kind of gets tight? It looks like it's kind of straight, it's kind of tight, but some people are like, man, I don't know what's wrong. And then they put an impact on it and then they fuck up those threads. And then you're into this hole quite a bit of time. So what you need to do is make sure if you ever thread something in and it starts to thread in and it just stops, get it going, starts to thread in and just stops. Sometimes it'll let you get a couple more threads than that. But if it just stops, stop. You stop, okay? Do not put an impact on this. What you need to do anytime you put an impact on anything is you want to make sure that it goes in. Look at that. Got a metric bolt, even though if I didn't know what came out of that, I'm gonna do this no matter what, either way. And I'm gonna thread this in. Good amount of threads. All right, that's good enough for me right there. If I could thread that in and it feels good, nice and tight, I'm gonna call that good right there. Okay, guys, that's how you can tell the difference between a metric and a standard bolt hole. If you're not the one who took it out and you're trying to put it back in and figure it out, and the way you would kind of tell if this bolt, if you can put it back in here, if you don't know, is the length.